Emotions by Catherine Reaper. Emotion is a subjective reaction to an important event involving psychological or observable behavioral change. Broken down into 4 components. 1. Must be important. If the event's not important, then they are less likely to have a reaction to it. 2. Involves psychological changes in heart rate, brain activity, hormone levels, and temperature. This can cause the blushing and the sweating that people feel when they're nervous or scared. Number 3, involves readiness for action. Number 4, depends on how you appraise or interpret an event. You may take an event as a good thing or a bad thing, and it all depends on how you interpret it, on how your emotions will react. Emotions in children. Why do children have emotion? They help them focus their attention. They motivate them. They enable them to take action, and it helps them to communicate. Darwin's 6 basic emotions that he claims are innate to the human species are interest, joy and happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. Emotions influence learning and thought. Focus attention. Learners pay attention more to things with emotional significance. Organize recall and memory. Learners remember details of emotional events. When they may go through a traumatic experience, they are often going to remember that years later, while they might not remember what they did last week in school. Determine whether learners approach or avoid a learning task. Determine how much effort they put into learning. So there's positive emotions such as interest, happiness, or excitement, and those promote learning and creativity. However, there's negative emotions like anger, sadness, and anxiety, and that impairs learning. Strategies to regulate emotions. Coping strategies are deliberate attempts to change thoughts or behavior when you are overwhelmed by emotion. Coping strategies can be either problem-focused or emotion-focused. Problem-focused is action-oriented and involves trying to change the situation. Like your student got a bad grade on a test and was upset, so she's going to study harder so she can get a better grade next time. Or it could be emotion-focused, which means trying to change emotions, changing one's thoughts about the situation, or seeking comfort from others. That same child may get a bad grade and decide that that grade really isn't that important and that it's going to be okay. Some students use emotional dissemblance. They fake it. They may be really upset about a situation, but they put a smile on their face and they go on. And in studies, it has shown that if you smile enough, your brain is going to make you think that you're happy, even when that might not be the case. So age trends in emotion regulation. Infants cannot control their emotions. They can often cope until their emotions are under control, though. So when your child is looking away from you, they may just be trying to get their emotions under control before they look back at you. Toddlers have more control over their emotions than infants. They can sometimes dissemble. They often need guided self-regulation to regulate their emotions, like hugging them or rocking them. In early childhood, preschoolers are more able to regulate their own emotions without help. They are more capable of emotional dissemblance, but their ability is still limited. In middle childhood, they can regulate their emotions in settings away from a caregiver, and they become better at coping. In adolescence, teenagers go through a lot. Emotional negativity is not a normal phase like most say it is. Teenagers are not supposed to be moody and sad. If a student is chronically unhappy or moody, find out why and help, because there's something going on in their lives. Individual diversity and emotion regulation. Learners with poor emotion regulation either experience too little emotion or too much emotion. With too little emotion, it leads to under-regulated learners that experience chronic negative emotions. Individual differences in this trait appear in the first months of life. So irritable babies are more likely to grow into irritable children and then into irritable adults. This is true as long as their environment does not improve substantially. Those with chronic negative emotions are likely to develop emotional disorders. Depression is a common internalizing disorder in which feelings of sadness are severe for at least 2 weeks or are milder but chronic. Chronic means all the time. Symptoms is changes in appetite, self-criticism, irritability, poor hygiene, they can't sit still, frequent crying, and sleep problems. In teens, depression can cause too much sleeping, but in younger, it often results in too little sleep. Anxiety is much like depression. It's a common internalizing disorder in which the child feels worried about future threats or threats to the sense of self. Symptoms existing would be poor concentration. They can't sit still. They may have foot kicking or mouth touching, lip licking, crying, chewing on objects. This is not to be confused with fear. Anxiety is worry about future threats, but fear is something that's going to harm them or is threatening them right now. So those two should not get confused. Group diversity and emotion regulation. Gender. Girls are more skilled at regulating emotions. However, girls are more likely to be anxious and twice as likely to be depressed. With socioeconomic status, low socioeconomic learners tend to be less able to regulate their emotions than middle socioeconomic status learners. And this could be due to the stresses that lower socioeconomic status students endure. Poverty causes a lot of conflict and issues that they have to deal with on a daily basis. Ethnicity. Black learners are more likely to have anxiety disorders, and Latino learners are more likely to have depression. Military-connected children. Military youth face special challenges. They miss their deployed parent. They fear for the safety of their parent. They take on adult responsibilities while a parent is gone. There's reintegrating the family after deployment. And they have to cope with a physically or psychologically traumatized parent or a death of a parent sometimes. So here's how you can help. Build on their strengths. If they seem more mature than your other classmates, use that to your advantage and let them know that they have strengths and that they can make a difference. Honor the many layers of sacrifice their families have made to defend others. Some people do a hero wall at school. Recognize that children and parents are crossing cultural boundaries between military and civilian communities. Be prepared to support children who may have internalizing or externalizing disorders linked to parent stress. And be patient with that parent left behind who may become less involved at school because they have a lot going on as well. Classroom implications of emotion regulation. Learners who are able to regulate their emotions will tend to be happier, be better liked, and better able to pay attention and learn. Learners who experience negativity at home tend to feel distress at school and have behavior problems. Talk about emotions in your classroom. Be sensitive to learners' emotions. You do not know how your student's going to feel when they come to school that day, and their emotions are going to affect their schoolwork. Scaffold and teach emotion regulation. Some things have to be taught. They're not just instant for some people. Create a positive classroom climate. Help depressed students and help those students who show anxiousness. Understanding others' emotions. Effective perspective taking, perceiving the emotions of another person. Empathy. an emotional state similar to what another person is feeling that results from perceiving the other's emotions. Sympathy, an emotional response that consists of feeling concern for a distressed other. Personal distress, a self-focused, aversive emotional reaction to someone else's negative emotion. Empathic distress, a self and other focused experience of taking on a friend's distress and experiencing it as one's own. Emotion contagion, the emotions of one person through facial, vocal, or gestural cues generate a similar emotion in another person. Social referencing, children read another's emotional expression to determine how they should respond in an ambiguous situation. Some or all of these are things that students who understand others' emotions will be demonstrating. Mirror neurons. How does emotion contagion work? Millions of neurons respond the same way whether you personally do something or watch someone else do it. Mirror neurons respond the same way when you laugh or when you watch someone else laugh. Sometimes when you watch someone do something, later down the line, you remember doing it yourself, even though you're not the one who done it. Scientists are still working on understanding mirror neurons. Age trends and understanding others' emotions. In infancy, emotion contagion is present at birth. They can imitate your facial expressions, and they can understand if you're happy or sad from your face, tone of voice, and body movement. Social referencing emerges between 6 and 10 months of age. In toddlers, by 18 months, they're able to show empathy. Early childhood, they use social referencing, can deliberately ignore an adult's emotions if they know that they aren't going to like it, and they can use emotional labels and understand more emotions as they age. Middle childhood uses social referencing, but less as they age. As they age, they can talk about emotions in more details, and they can also take into account multiple emotions. In adolescence, social referencing and emotion contagion continue. There may be decreased empathy with age. Individual diversity and understanding others' emotions. Learners who are good at labeling and reading others' emotions have higher academic achievement, greater self-control, they're more cooperative. But learners who are poor at reading emotional cues are less liked by their peers, they tend to be aggressive and have behavior problems in the classroom. Group diversity and understanding others' emotions. Gender. Gender differences in empathy are not consistently found. However, when they are found, girls have more empathy than boys. The girl's vulnerability to depression may be linked to this greater empathetic distress. In culture, Darwin argued that facial expressions are universal. Research shows that this is true. However, expressions may differ slightly in other cultures, so people who are of different cultures are more likely to read emotions accurately with the same people in their culture. Classroom implications of understanding others' emotions. Learners with the skill to read others' emotions in classroom tend to be less aggressive, higher achievers, and more popular among teachers and classmates. They help students develop sensitivity to others' emotions by you can help students develop sensitivity to others' emotions by use victim-centered discipline. Let them know how their actions made someone else feel. Use emotion contagion and social referencing. Use literature to help learners imagine the emotions of others and help learners improve emotion regulation. Charles Darwin was born in 1809 and died in 1882. He was a famous scientist in history. He had the ethological perspective and wrote a book about emotion expression. He believed everyone had and understood the same emotions across cultures. He believed there were 6 basic emotions: interest, joy and happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. Test anxiety is dispositional proneness toward anxiety in test situations that interferes with performance. Rare in primary grades, rises from 3rd to 5th grade, and stabilizes through adolescence and drops in college. Test anxious learners engage in so much worry that it consumes much of their working memory, leaving less space for processing test items. Like choking under pressure results from cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Test anxiety is not a lack of ability, but difficulty in trying to show ability. Math anxiety is dispositional proneness toward anxiety at the prospect of doing math or taking a math test. Do poorly on math tests and they try to avoid math classes and they learn less in math class. can be caused by deficits in basic foundational math skills, and math anxiety can be learned from teachers and parents.